For a simple harmonic motion graph, there are three quantities that we can get just by reading the graph. We really don't have to do any significant calculations. Those three quantities are the phase shift, the amplitude, and the period. So we can get those three quantities just by reading the graph. And I want to show you how to do that. I'm going to start by talking about the amplitude. So the amplitude is the maximum displacement from equilibrium. So on a simple harmonic motion graph, typically we draw it around the origin. So you can see the axis going right through, and so that's equilibrium. So the amplitude would be from here down to here. This is the amplitude. At the same time, this from here to here, this is also the amplitude. If you go from all the way at the top, so let me go from here all the way at the top, from a peak down to a trough, okay, that whole distance is twice the amplitude. And that's important to realize because sometimes, and this is the case in the lab, sometimes your simple harmonic motion isn't centered on the origin. And you'll see that on the for the lab, the graphs in the lab, it's not centered on the origin. So it's important to realize that from the peak to the trough is actually twice the amplitude. Again, the amplitude is from the equilibrium to the greatest displacement. So I want to point that out. Now, the other thing that you can get quite easily from just reading a graph is the period. The period, the easiest way to get it is probably to go from peak to peak. From here to here, that's the period. You could also go trough to trough. From here to here, that's the period. Now notice that the period, we'd be reading the values off to get it. We'd read the values off of the x-axis. For the amplitude, you'd be reading the values off the y-axis. But yeah, peak to peak or trough to trough, that's easiest. But you're not limited to that. For example, we could come down. If I come down equally, I could go from here to here. That would also be the period. The point is you have to include a whole cycle. As long as you're including one whole cycle, then you're going to be measuring the period. The last thing that you can get is the phase shift. I already have a video posted about the phase shift, but just to remind you all, yes, you can get the phase shift from the graph. You have to look at the initial position. And you might also need to look, if it's at 0, if the initial position is 0, then you're also going to need to look at the initial velocity, whether it's positive or negative. And that's discussed in that other video.